Welcome back to the Hero Report. My name is Ari Cohen, and with me, as always, fresh from his travels, is Matt Langdon. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing well. I'm honestly a bit jet-lagged, but I feel fine now, but getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning is getting old already.
Yeah, I imagine. And why don't you tell people quickly? I mean, I've been following your great European adventure, but why don't you tell everyone where you've been?
I've been to London, Amsterdam, and Paris. Amsterdam mainly because my flight was leaving from there. But I did a presentation in a school in London for the Hero Construction Company, which went over well. The kids got it. They laughed at my jokes better than American audiences do, which was very gratifying. It went well, and they had a big follow-up afterwards, so I was pretty happy about that. Had dinner with a couple of children's TV show creators who are interested in teaching heroism through television to young kids. And I can plug the new show called Mike the Knight on Nick Jr. Judah might be interested in that one. Might Perfect. Be a bit young at this point, but my kid is addicted already after watching one episode. But they're very interested in using TV as a tool for character development, and one of them had been involved with Jim Henson a lot with the Muppets and Sesame Street, and she was a co-creator of Fraggle Rock, so there's a long history there of wanting to teach through TV. Mm-hmm. And then met up with in Paris with a woman who's done some of my presentations at international schools. And she's moving back to Germany this year and plans to kick that back up again. And so it was cool. It was exciting stuff. And yeah, I'm back now and trying to get on a proper sleep schedule. But I have a kid who's not really wanting to get back on that proper sleep schedule yet either.
Right. Well, we'll try to keep you awake for the next half hour or so. And then we'll see what happens after that. But it's good to have you back. We had a hiatus from the Hero Report last week,
internet problems.
Yes, we had some connection issues. We thought we would do our first transcontinental Hero Report, but we'll have to save that for another time.
I had the Queen lined up too.
See, we're so close. Well, what I thought we would talk a little bit about today was the subject of a blog post that I wrote over the weekend that I think caught some people's attention, and that might be a little controversial. I'm not sure if we can decide together whether it's controversial or not, or whether we both just agree and everyone else is wrong. We'll see. But I was responding to a piece that someone sent me from Esquire magazine. I hadn't read it. It was from probably about 3 weeks ago, and it was a piece about two things. First, what the author called our participation culture, which was this sort of insulting. It was meant to insult. It was this idea that everybody in this country, I suppose. We can talk about other countries later, but it was clearly a U.S.-focused piece. Everybody here gets a ribbon at field day just for showing up. Participation is celebrated, and some people even will go so far as to say that just showing up makes you a hero. And so it really devalues the entire concept of heroism. I am somewhat sympathetic to this. But the other part of the piece was about soldiering. And in particular was this idea that politicians make these grand statements about how our men and women in the armed forces are all heroes, and the author suggested that they're not. Simply being in the armed forces doesn't make you a hero. What would make you a hero is if you went and actually did something impressive as a member of the armed forces. And the fact that we say that everyone is a hero has all sorts of deleterious consequences for us. It makes us think perhaps the wrong way about war. It allows politicians to use military service and people in uniform to their own ends, and so on. And I took issue with that. I thought that this was a mistake. And in particular, my argument was that in an era when we have a military that people join on a volunteer basis, there is something noteworthy about that volunteerism because of the risk associated with it, and in particular today, because of the certainty, essentially, that one will be sent off to actually fight, and also because it's unpopular, I have to say, right? Because we're fighting unpopular wars. It's not as though joining up your hometown necessarily throws your parade, despite the climate, despite the politicians' suggestions that perhaps they ought to. And so I contrasted that with previous eras when we didn't have a voluntary military, where in fact people were drafted, and so there's no opportunity at that moment to say, I choose this, right? The only opportunity is to choose not to do it, right? To burn one's draft card or move to Canada or whatever. And so we can have that conversation as well. But there you go. I've set out sort of what I was responding to and indeed what my response was. And I know you read the post, and we'll link to it when we post this video as well, so people who are watching can find it. If you're interested in reading my post or the Esquire piece, you can find it on my blog. But Matt, what do you think?
Well, I think I disagree slightly with, or disagree partially with you. This was a big issue a couple of years ago. There was a war between two Facebook groups that got a lot of exposure, and I wrote about it and read about it quite a bit back then. There was a lot of Facebook status updates calling soldiers heroes and saying they're our heroes, and someone, I think, started a Facebook page that said not all soldiers are heroes. And then there was a very angry response to that, and a sort of counter Facebook page that was set up that was all soldiers are heroes. And there was a petition to have the original group removed from Facebook because it was so offensive, by simply saying that not all soldiers are heroes. And I mean, I think you'd be arguing without logic if you said that all soldiers are heroes. There's just there's too many pieces of evidence that show that they're not all heroes. We see them all too frequently, and we may have even mentioned some in past episodes of the Hero Report. But at the time, I completely agreed with you that the choice to sign up for military duty can be considered heroic. But there's not only one motivation for signing up for the armed forces. And I think someone responded to you either on the blog or somewhere else about some of the socioeconomic reasons. That's certainly a big part of it. People sign up to get their college paid for because they think college is the key to their future. They sign up because they have they don't see any other options. They sign up because they've been preyed on by recruiting officers, whatever. So there is some sense that maybe some people don't have a choice. But there's all kinds of choices for signing up. It might be to defend your country. It might be being bored. It might be that you have an idea that you want to protect freedom. It might be that you want to kill people. We don't know what each soldier's reasoning was for joining. But there's absolutely the possibility that choice was heroic. And especially now, as you say, with ongoing wars, it's not just a chance that you'll be involved in a war. You will be. Right.
And I think, for me, it's clear to me that whoever came up with the Facebook idea that not all soldiers are heroes, I mean, you don't have to look very far. It's just in the last week that we had an American service member shoot, 16 people in Afghanistan. So, it's very clear. We had, just in the past month again, the burning of the Qurans. We had the desecration of corpses not long ago. There are all sorts of examples of non-heroic behavior by people in the armed forces, and not just non-heroic, but really vile, right? I mean, villainous behavior.
Behavior that requires a hero. Right?
That's right.
Behavior that needs a hero, and Abu Ghraib was a great example of that. That there's a lot of bad stuff going on
that's right.
Needs a hero to step up.
Nonetheless, I mean, I think I want to stick to the idea it's true, there are all sorts of reasons that people sign up. But in signing up, there is this risk that one takes, and presumably at some level, one hopes to do something good, right? Only because I assume most people don't sign up with the intention of doing harm. And perhaps people will want to debate this with me. Maybe there are a significant number of people who go into the armed services because they really like the idea of having a weapon and being able to use that weapon for ill, right, to actually harm people.
Yeah, and I think it's. I don't think you can discount that. I think that's I think assumption is the key part of your sentence there,
Sure.
because we don't know, and you and I are both from certain backgrounds that we aren't going to understand a lot of the motivations. And as another reason for signing up that I didn't mention was maybe family pressure, that this is what is done in this family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. So, you know, at the same time, I wonder, you know, if you do have people who sign up, you know, to go and fight overseas because they really want to fight, you know, what do we say about that? You know, as someone who's been, I refer to this all the time because, of course, it's what drew me into the whole conversation about heroism, but as someone who started reading and writing about the heroes of ancient Greece, they all signed up to fight, right? I mean, that was what they wanted to do. That was how you achieved a glorious name. You went out and you either dealt all sorts of violent death to others and thereby assured yourself a glorious name, or you yourself died a glorious death and thereby brought glory to someone else and assured yourself a glorious name when you were buried and the funeral games were held for you. So in some sense, I'm steeped in this idea that there is a kind of battlefield heroism that I don't want to entirely discount. I think that when most people talk about heroic behavior today, they are thinking about one particular kind of heroism, right? It is only the kind of heroism that exhibits helping behavior. Yeah? The altruistic, moral hero that makes us all comfortable because he or she goes out on a limb, sacrifices, and thereby assists others or responds to the greater good or something like that. But this is only one strain of heroic behavior as far as I'm concerned. There is also this person who wants to go and do an impressive thing, understands it as being important for his own or her own sense of identity, ongoing, not simply at the moment, but into the future as well, and of course has a sort of personal, you know, ethical code that sees this behavior as being helpful in some sense, right? All of the heroes who went to fight at Troy, they saw themselves as participating in a cause that helped the rest of the Greeks. Yeah. So in some sense, there's still this kind of, you know, there's a pro-social within the in-group kind of mentality. This, of course, I think makes people uncomfortable today, right? It's not the kind of heroism that we all like. It's not as easy to get behind. The guy who wants,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think you've got a point. I think we covered this war type of heroism a little bit with Zeno Franco when he was on, and that, you know, he kind of shared with us the idea that modern warfare has made that very difficult to replicate, and modern warfare being that you, I mean, people are being killed from great distances with little risk. That there's not there's certainly risk of dying in war today from a bullet from you have no idea where, or a roadside bomb or whatever it is. So it's a different kind of courage, or it's a different kind of valor going into battle. Whereas, you know, previously you had a pretty good idea of how it was going to happen if it happened, that it was going to be someone in front of you. So I think it's the motivation. If there's a motivation to go in and kill and gain glory, that I'm not sure that fits in today's society, and I think that we've talked about that before too. The difference in society's goals or norms, and so having a soldier who is ready to go out and kill a whole lot of people, it doesn't sit well with our supposed civilized society.
Right, but then Matt, what do we want our soldier to do? Right? If we don't want our soldier to be prepared to go out and kill a lot of people, what do we want our soldier to do? What should he be prepared or she be prepared to do?
That's a good question.
Just kind of hang out and hope for the best, and look, all of this is being discussed in the context of war, right? Which is terrible, and which we, if we could eradicate, I think we would all be really happy to do that. We all, I guess, you and I don't know about people, for example, who sign up to gain glory, but it seems to me that in the context of war, if you're not interested in going out and winning, which necessitates beating the other side in one way or another, well, what are you doing, right? I mean, how can we be committed to that war if what we're interested in is not winning it? Maybe we could want to win a war, kill them with kindness, for example. Maybe we want all of our soldiers to do that. There is certainly a place for that, right? We want to, this is all the winning the hearts and minds and so on. That obviously has a huge place. After the main fighting has been done, we somehow need our soldiers to switch over to a different kind of mentality where now they work with the people, they help the people rather than subjugate them and so on. But when the fighting is on, I think we still, deep down, we don't want to talk about it, right? But deep down, don't we want to have people out on the front lines who are expert at winning, and thereby, aren't we saying that we need people who are going to take lives?
Well, I think that's the massive disconnect that we have today. That two wars have been going on for 10+ years because there's a disconnect, because the average person isn't thinking about the reality of going over and killing thousands of people. That it just doesn't exist in the average person's mind, and that's why there aren't mass demonstrations against, or there aren't more real mass demonstrations against war, because it doesn't affect most people. It's right. And people don't think about that. They don't think about what the reality is of going into battle, whatever battle looks like these days. They're watching Pearl Harbor or whatever it is and seeing the glory of World War II, which not many people in World War II considered it to be very glorious, apart from Jack Churchill, who's someone you should look into. Absolutely bizarre guy. He was very disappointed that the Americans ended the war early. That kind of guy. Yeah.
But what you say is really interesting there, right? I mean, first of all, just as we talked about, with Zeno Franco, the technological aspect of this. First of all, wars have dragged on, and second of all, people are just being killed in sort of drips and drams, right? There aren't these big pitched battles where a whole bunch of people and if there were, I think these things would end much more speedily, right? Because we wouldn't have the appetite for it. But especially with no real clear end goal, right? With the Second World War, and it's such a good contrast, right? Because people did go off to that war with a sort of excitement. Yeah, there was a real purpose, a national purpose. It was a defensive purpose. It was seen as a defensive war against something that was really evil. And so when people said, "I'm going to go off and kill a bunch of Nazis," everyone could sort of shake their heads, nod, and say, "Yeah, that's right. That's the thing to do." And even today, you see movies where people go off and want to kill a bunch of Nazis, and no one is shedding tears for the Nazis. and saying, oh, these Nazis had families back at home, and it's very sad for them, right? In the way that people were writing that sort of thing about the Libyan soldiers who were being attacked from the air. Well, yeah, they're driving tanks that are shelling all these cities, but they're family men, and they have wives and children at home and parents who love them. I mean, no one would say that about the Nazis, it seems to me, even today, because there was a clear sense of purpose. There was it was a heroic goal, and people who went off to fight felt, that they were going to do, something really good. Now, the reality of it was really bleak, right? I mean, because war is terrible. It wasn't, one group dressed in white fighting another group dressed in black, and the people in white had the high ground, and their whites were never brighter. I mean, they were tromping around in the mud for years, and it was a terrible experience. But now, as you say, it's quite different, right?
Well, it's a whole different. It's hard to even use the same definition for what's happening now and what happened in World War II, or even what happened in Vietnam. There aren't those battles. There's not really troop movements. I mean, that was happened at the start, but it's not part of. It's almost policing now. It's finding the bad guys and getting rid of them, and being attacked by the bad guys, but not en masse and not across enemy lines or things like that. It's a whole different experience now. It's it's very different. Did you see the TV show Generation Kill? You must have, being the
I haven't. Yeah, I haven't. No.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of there were a lot of examples in there of the kind of heroism that I think you can see in the from soldiers now, and that's disobeying immoral orders. So there's that. I think that there is a different kind of heroism. Again, I mean, I think the heroism that we think of today with the military is the sacrifice, the jumping on the grenade, or dying in defending your the people around you. But there's also that okay, this is very wrong what you're telling us to do. We're not going to do it.
Yeah, and see, I would call both of those sort of moral heroism, right? Because they're making these sort of moral choices, and they result in there's a real risk, right? There's sacrifice, there's danger to oneself, whether it's one's career or or one's life, right? But it's with a moral end in mind.
Right. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it comes down to this idea that soldiers are or aren't heroes. It comes down to the fact that soldiers are just people, and like any other people, they are capable of anything. They're capable of just standing by. They're capable of heroism. They're capable of doing horrible things, just like police officers, just like firefighters, just like college professors. They're the same. They all have the same choices. Now, soldiers get into more situations where those choices are going to have to be made.
Right. It's about opportunity, isn't it? Right. I mean, and that is part of what triggered the signing up issue for me. Right. Choosing to put oneself in this situation, one says, I don't have to, but I'm going to. Right. Because I understand that there's something valuable in this. Right. Now, again, some people might say I don't see any value in it, but I want to be paid, or I don't care about anyone's good. I just want to be trained to use a machine gun, right? Fine. We have to accept that those people exist, and we'll have to put them perhaps out of the story for the time being. There's nothing we can do with them. They're not making the same heroic choice, but they are putting themselves nonetheless in a position to be heroes. Right?
Yeah, I think there's three parts to that heroic decision, and that it has to be a choice to do something as opposed to doing nothing. It has to have risk or sacrifice, and they certainly qualify, but it also has to have the intent of good for others, or the greater good. And if it's to pay your own college tuition, or if it's to shoot weapons, or if it's to kill someone, that doesn't really qualify. But if you've got a general positive intent that you want to help in some way, whatever it is, if your intent is to protect the country, if your intent is to help civilians on the ground in another country, if it's to be part of the armed forces because you want to be there for natural disaster detail, anything like that, I think, and any positive intent coupled with those other two absolutely makes for a heroic choice.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think when you say these are just people like all of us, I think that that's certainly true. But there is something really important about this opportunity for heroism, right? My opportunities are on a much different scale and a much different level, right? I mean, what are my opportunities for heroism? I've already said, but when we talked a few minutes before we started recording, I said, I have the option. I could go sign up. I have friends who have joined the military, who are college professors, and there's no chance. I'm not doing that, right? That's not something that I would choose to do, right? So I recognize, based on the fact that I have this opportunity and I'm not taking it, that there is something unique about those who do, right?
Right, and some of it would be the drive, right? That drive to do whatever it is they want to do. So that's lacking in you. You don't need to pay for a college education, and maybe you don't. The drive to protect the country with the risk of sacrificing your life isn't. It's just not high enough.
It might be there at a different time, right?
Right.
If we found ourselves in a situation not where we were fighting wars that that I see as not really having a clear end goal, as not really having a clear sort of national security interest for our country, but that instead sort of spun out from a narrative in one case that was a false narrative, in another case that had a totally different reason for why we're still engaged. And if it was a different story,
right.
Perhaps I could see myself doing this. Right? If it really was the case that we were at war and it was an existential threat or whatever, perhaps my decision is very different. But here, that's not the case at all. So it's a very straightforward story about why I'm not joining up, but nonetheless, I'm not. Right? And so. Again, I'm constraining my own options for heroic behavior, right? So my options include podcasting about heroism and writing blog posts about doing the morally right thing and talking about Libya and Syria and places that I think where people are in need of assistance and what else, right? I mean, that's the thing. In the world of the college professor, unless we start, and maybe we want to, maybe we'll do this in a different episode of the Hero Report, we can start talking about what makes me heroic, which would be great, right? We could have a whole episode devoted to why I think I'm a hero. And then we could, we'd have to tell this story about how education as such, right, teaching is a heroic endeavor. But really, isn't it true, like, there are some people who have the options really set out before them. They make a choice that allows them greater opportunities for heroic behavior, and I'm not one of those people.
Well, absolutely. You can choose to put yourself in situations where you're going to encounter things that require that choice, whether it's yes or no on the choice. But I think what you're doing and what I'm doing is, in talking about and learning about and reading about heroism and heroes themselves, we're preparing ourselves for a potential moment that we could be called on to become heroes. Now, it's going to happen. There's a smaller chance that it's going to happen for us than a soldier in Iraq, but it could happen, and and I think we are better prepared than the average person because of the work that we're doing, the thoughts that we're having, the videos that we watch, the stories that we read. And I think that's the hero in training, the hero in waiting deal, which I think we can obviously do a whole episode on as well. But that's what we're doing.
Yeah. I think that makes sense, right? And it's a contrast. As we were talking about this, I was thinking about Drew Jacob, who we had on the Hero Report not too long ago, right? Drew is actively putting himself in a situation to have heroic moments, right? And it's quite different from someone like us. We're just theoretically, in some sense, preparing on the chance, on the assumption that someday something will happen, in front of us, and we'll then respond the right way. And we're helping other people, hopefully, to be set up in the same way. But those are two very different things. And in some sense, I think with my blog post, I wanted to suggest that the people who are actively going out and doing it, there's something impressive about that. There's something noteworthy about it. I think the way I ended my blog post, I said it's certainly a better use of our time to talk about these people as heroes and to think about them as heroes than entertainers, right? Which is how we spend so much of our time, right? Sports heroes and so on. I think that the person who completes a pass on the football field, or of course I've been watching a lot of basketball over the last few days. The Michigan State big man who steps out and hits the three-pointer. I feel really excited when that happens, but that's not my hero. There's nothing heroic about it. It's a great play.
No, I think you're absolutely right, but I don't think we should be promoting the idea that all soldiers are heroes either. I think there's some danger in that as well. I think it's important to be really clear in that message that it's not just everyone.
Yeah.
That there is a heroic choice that can be made in signing up. But it's and especially once you sign up, it's what happens after that as well. Who knows? Good intentions can turn all over the place.
Right. I mean, it could be, and this I think is what's really interesting, right? It could be the person who signs up for the Marines because he just really wants to shoot a lot of people in the Middle East, right? Who ends up being the whistleblower, who goes over there and really does the right thing. And it could be the person who says, oh, I want to help others, and I see this as being the best way to help my country, and I've got all the purest motives, who goes and does something really vile and awful. Because when you're in theater, anything can happen, and of course this goes back to what we've been talking about, why we do this, why we want to be educators about heroism, because we think that you're more likely to behave in the way that we'd like you to behave, the heroic way, the morally heroic way, if you've done some thinking about how you would act in situation X or Y, right? Rather than if you just think, well, I'll go and I'll see what happens, and I'm going to hope for the best. Because when things start to unravel, if you haven't done that work in your head, the chances aren't so good that you're going to behave the way that you hope you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if this is still the case, but a few years ago, someone I know, I can't tell you exactly which one of them it was approached by the military to do some sort of character training, because they in all of basic training they have 1 hour, I think, to talk about character. And what an important thing to do is to prepare these people who are going into situations where where they're going to be faced with situations requiring action or hoping for action, to have had all of them to think about it, think about what they would do in hypothetical situations. But that's, I mean, ultimately that's not the modern way of warfare, is it? You've got to act and eliminate whatever threat is there. It's a tough thing, but I think that's important. I think it's important that people think about what they might do and think about it regularly.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I want to teach courses on human rights. It seems to me that if you're going to be in the military, you should take a human rights class in college. And it's why I'm interested in sort of which materials educators use, right? Because I think that using a textbook to talk about human rights norms and so on, it doesn't really have the same impact as using personal stories that people can identify with, right? Especially, if we're looking at, the Holocaust or the genocide in Rwanda or something, using stories about rescuers, which I've spent some time writing about, that really has an impact, or has the opportunity to make an impact in the way that a historical account that says, this many people were killed, and here's how they were killed, and here are some of the main names of the people who were the perpetrators, and now we're going to take a test. I think that that's just not, that doesn't have the same impact. It doesn't set people up in the same way to care, and I think that's really, if I'm thinking about the job that I do, I see that as being a really critical component, is getting people to care about the people in these situations on the off chance that they might find themselves in a similar situation someday. Absolutely.
And I use individual hero stories for every presentation I do too. And I'd love to have an episode about Holocaust rescuers, because there are some pretty great stories and lots of different types of actions that happened as well. I think that's worth looking at.
And different motivations too, which I think is really interesting. That's what actually got me started on this whole heroism project. In fact, was why did some people rescue when other people either collaborated or did nothing? Right? It's the classic bystander case. So yeah, I think it'd be a fascinating thing to talk about.
Good. Well, we're coming up on 11 o'clock.
We are. This was a good one. I think. Well, maybe I'll write another blog post, or maybe I'll just put this one up and put this episode up, and we can talk about whether my thoughts changed a lot or a little. Probably a little. But I because I continue to think that there's something really valuable in recognizing the service of others. But as you say, we have to complicate that by thinking about motivation, something that we can never really know entirely, what it is that motivates other people, but that nonetheless we have to take into account as much as we can. Right.
All right. Well, we can pause here, and we'll try to get a guest for Friday.
Yeah.
I'll put some feelers out, and we've been putting feelers out elsewhere. And anyone who's viewing this, if you're interested in being a guest, get in touch.
Yeah, we have a number of very exciting guests, I think, coming up over the next month or so. Before long, we can start announcing our upcoming schedule once we really have people slotted into place. But for all of you loyal Hero Report watchers and listeners, we're really going to have an exciting spring for you. So get ready. If you like heroism, you'll like all of the guests that we'll have coming on. So Matt, thanks. It's good to see you back on this side of the ocean. I'll be interested in hearing whether there's going to be a Matt Langdon Australian character in one of these new TV shows that you mentioned, and we'll speak again soon.
All right. Thanks, Ari. We'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Bye-bye.